What is value lock-in? And could you give some historical examples?
So value lock-in is when a single ideology or value system or kind of set of ideologies kind of takes control of an area or in the limit the whole world and then persists for an extremely long time. And this is one thing that I think can have very, very long lasting effects. And we've already seen it throughout history. And so in What We Are the Future, I give a story of ancient China. So during this period that's known as the 100 Schools of Thought, the Zhou dynasty had fallen, and there was a lot of fragmentation, like ideological fragmentation in China. And wandering philosophers would go from state to state with a package of kind of philosophical ideas and moral views and political policy recommendations and try and convince like political elites of their ideas. And there were four main schools. There were the Confucians that we're kind of most familiar with, the legalists, which are kind of like Machiavellian, like political realists. How do you get power was the main focus of them. Taoists, who are these kind of somewhat more spiritual, like acting in accordance with the way, with nature, like advocating spontaneity, honesty. And then finally the Moists, which I read and I'm like, wow, they were kind of similar to the effective altruists, except in ancient China, where they were about promoting good outcomes and good outcomes impartially considered. They forewent much like fancy kind of spending on luxury or ritual. So their funeral rites were very modest. They wore very modest clothes. And they were just really concerned about trying to make the world better. And so they created a paramilitary group in order to defend cities that were under siege, where the reasoning being that if defensive technology and defensive strategy was so good, then no one could ever wage a war because no one could ever win. And so there was this great diversity of thought. But what happened? One state within China, the Qin, influenced by legalism, took over and tried to essentially make legalism state orthodoxy. And the Emperor Qin declared himself the 10,000-year emperor, wanted this ideology to persist indefinitely. It actually only lasted 14 years because there was a kind of counter-rebellion, and that was the start of the Han dynasty, which then successfully did, basically, over the course of a while, quell kind of other ideological competition, and instead implemented Confucianisms like this is the official state ideology, and that persisted for 2,000 years. And that's kind of just one example among many. Over and over again, you see what's the kind of ideology or belief set of a ruling power, whether that's Catholics or Protestants, or is it communism of the Khmer Rouge or of Stalin, or National Socialism of Hitler. Once that ideology gets into power, or people with those ideology get into power, they quickly try and stomp out the competition. And the worry is that that could happen with the entire world. So again, I spoke of a risk of Third World War. Well, what might happen as a result? One ideology could take power globally after winning such a war, implement a world government or world state, or at least dominant world ideology. Then we're in this situation where there's much less ideological competition. And at least one reason why we've gotten moral change and moral progress over time, which is in virtue of having a diversity of moral views that are able to like kind of fight it out, and in ideal circumstances, the best argument wins. We would no longer have that. And so if there was a single kind of dominant ideology in the world, that could persist for an extremely long time, I think. And if it was wrong, which is quite likely to be wrong, because I think most of our moral views are probably wrong, that would be like very bad indeed.
Yeah. I mean, just to give you an idea, I mean, this is not exactly ideological, but you mentioned the Han dynasty, and Mandarin Chinese, one way to say Mandarin Chinese is Hanyu, which is the language of the Han people.
Yeah,
like Hanyu Pinyin is the romanization system used, which most people have seen with the diacritical marks for tones for Mandarin Chinese. So these things can last a very long time indeed. Do you have any other examples of value lock-in that could be past tense, historical examples, or attempts that are being made currently that you think are worth making mention of? Could be either.
I mean, historically, one particularly salient example was when the Khmer Rouge took power in Cambodia. Pol Pot, just very systematically, like anyone who disagreed with the kind of party ideology would be, I mean, generally would just be executed. So 25% of the population were killed in Cambodia. And I mean, again, it's like very transparent what's happening. He has this quote, purify the party, purify the army, purify the cadres. So it's just very clear that's what's going on is, almost like a species or virus kind of taking over and like other competitors get wiped out. This one ideology takes over, competitors are wiped out. Similarly, if we look at like British history with at different times Catholics and Protestants taking power, there was one act passed called the Act of Uniformity, with the Protestants saying like, okay, Catholicism is now banned in this country. And again, it's like very boldly named. And in general, just if you have a particular moral view, then you are going to want everyone else in the world to have that particular moral view as well.